Good morning, this is Shindo. I've been thinking about doing a series of videos for a while now about the role of the executive branch, the presidency. In order to do this, I'm going to have to go back to my educational roots myself. I have a degree in education, so I'm going to be sort of in the position of your high school teacher, which is what I was educated to be. So therefore, you're going to find some of this a little dry. However, I believe it's important to get into this just so that you have the information that will help you to understand what exactly is happening between the three branches of government. We have a presidency in President Trump that is obviously, it's just quite apparent unless he does a complete 180 that it will move into a Imperial Presidency. That is what I'm going to call these videos, the Imperial Presidency. I have heard a lot of talk about how the president can't do this, the president can't do that, because the Constitution's going to stop him. Well, in an ideal world, that would be correct. But we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world in which the executive branch has many times in the past overreached its boundaries. I want to do this series of videos so that you understand what has led us up to a president being able to take the kind of power that this president that we now have has already and will to great extent in the future. If any indication of the way he is now, he will definitely be extending his reach well beyond where the Constitution tells him he can as the executive. I will be highlighting different presidents that we have had and how they have extended their reach beyond what the Constitution clearly defines as their power. This is to keep you more informed so that you understand that when things happen, it's foolishness to live in a idealistic way of thinking. And many people on the left, I see, do that, believing that somehow, somewhere, somebody's going to jump in and stop Donald Trump from doing basically whatever Donald Trump wants to do. But this is going to be the story of the slow progress of the executive branch over the last 200, since the beginning of this country, which is now this year going to be 240 years in September. This country was not founded in 1776. This country, as we know it, was founded in 1787, when the framers first put together a working constitution. Now, the Constitution is one of the greatest legal documents ever written. There's no question about that. And it has, with a little bit of leverage from time to time, held the test of time over the course of the last 240 years. It is a brilliant document, and it is something that established the longest running democratic republic that this planet has ever seen. And the Constitution clearly designates three branches of government what we call check and balances. That would be the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. Lately, over the course of the last couple of years, since the judicial branch has been making different judgments, you have heard on the right people saying that the judicial branch is legislating from the bench. The legislature, that is the Congress, make laws. The judicial branch is there to interpret laws. The executive branch is there to enforce the law. So you have seen a lot of power play between the three branches, but especially between the executive and the judicial. And this is over the course of the 240 years since the foundation of this country. The reason why the executive and the legislative branch don't butt heads as often as the executive and the judicial is because the legislative branch, quite frankly, has dropped the ball so many times. The Congress has become nothing but a bunch of people who do grandstanding and argue so that they can play to their base and get reelected. They have not become a very effective organization. And especially in the last 50 years, the legislative branch has basically abandoned its power to the executive branch. Therefore, what you have, the only ones who are really checking the executive branch is the judicial branch. I am speaking in generalities. I'm not getting into specifics in this, the first video. I just want to set these things up so that you know that Congress is the one who passes these laws. These laws, folks, it's just bureaucracy. It's just meaningless law that just makes everything more difficult for you and me. They're supposed to just basically stand out of our way. The only real purpose of the federal government is to protect its citizens and to tax. I mean, everything outside of that is just gravy. So for these videos, I'm going to be concentrating on the executive and the judicial branch because, as I said, over the course of the last 240 years, you have seen these two branches check each other's power much more often than you see the legislative branch, especially in the last 50 years. And the reason I say the last 50 years, which I won't be getting into until later, is because the legislative branch, which was supposed to be the only branch that can actually declare war, has even given that power over to the executive branch. And when they did that with the Tonkin Gulf Accord, which I will get into, they really gave the executive, the president, much more power, much more power than the framers of the Constitution ever envisioned. And you hear a lot about executive orders. Well, executive orders are nothing but a piece of paper. Okay? The president signs it. So what? I mean, so what? It doesn't mean anything. It shouldn't have to just be enforced. But we have been so regulated, we have been so indoctrinated over the course of the history of this country to regard the president as the head of the government. Well, he's not the head of the government. He's the head of the executive branch of the government. That's one of three. So I will be discussing, I know that the presidents that I will definitely be discussing will be Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Woodrow Wilson, and LBJ Johnson. These are the presidents that we have had that had the most influence over the course of this country. Of course, George Washington. Perhaps I'll discuss him generally speaking to begin with. Of course, I want to do this in chronological order. So this is just an introduction. If you're interested, please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, comment, share my videos. We will be getting into a history lesson, and the thesis of these videos basically is the power that the executive branches have taken over the course of the last 240 years that have given the authority and power that you're going to see Donald Trump take over the course of the next 4 years, probably longer than that. We have created this kingdom, and we have simply voted in a new king from time to time. And that king sometimes doesn't take much power, and sometimes that king is someone like Donald Trump, who truly believes that if he says it, it must be true. So therefore he must therefore do it. And you have, of course, a Christian indoctrination that comes from Romans chapter 13. You read it for yourself, Romans chapter 13, where you're directed to abide by whatever the authorities, the king, tells you to do. Stay tuned. We'll be getting into the foundation of this country, George Washington, and our first common man president, Andrew Jackson. This is Shindo. Stay tuned. I will be doing these videos, starting them very soon. Have a good Sunday.